Before we begin our story, please don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more, and drop a comment with your feedback on our stories. We'd love to hear your thoughts. The stars were whispering again. Dr. Eleanor Voss, whose eyes shimmered with equal parts awe and sorrow, sat alone in the observation deck of Research Station Omega-19. The vast viewport revealed a panorama of eternal black, the silent zone, a graveyard where once thriving colonies had been swallowed whole by cosmic indifference. Here, where the boundaries of life and death blurred beneath the gloom, she dedicated 5 relentless years to listening, deciphering, and yearning for a response from the void. Eleanor's mind wandered to her childhood amid remote highlands on Earth, where legends of cosmic deities mingled with the crisp night air. Those whispered lullabies, stories of ancient voices among the stars, had driven her to follow a path few dared tread. Now, standing on the precipice of discovery and madness, she clutched the console as if it were a talisman against isolation. Without warning, the speakers in the silent corridor erupted in a transmission unlike anything she'd encountered before. Layered, insidious frequencies cascaded in a polyglot melody composed of forgotten tongues, Iridian cadences, the gravelly relics of old Martian, and even Proto-Earth dialects long buried by time. Every word carried a unifying, ominous refrain. We heard them. We answered. Now they are coming. Eleanor's breath fogged the cold, reinforced glass as she leaned closer. Outside, the stars did not twinkle kindly, they flickered erratically, as if a cosmic film reel were suffering fatal technical issues. Then, amidst the visual static and spiritual disquiet, a shadow, more suggestion than substance, crossed the deck. Her heart thundered. She spun around, her senses straining to capture any anomaly, but nothing concrete revealed itself. A moment later, the lights abruptly failed, plunging the deck into an almost palpable blackness. In that utter void, a sound, a single, almost imperceptible inhalation, seemed to rise from the depths of nothingness. With desperation fueling her trembling fingers, Eleanor tapped out one final message to Central Command: they are not bound by time. They are already. Before she could finish, a violent surge of static obliterated her transmission, leaving only the echo of her final words in the starless silence. Aboard the aged but battle-hardened vessel Echo 7, Captain Elias Rains fought a private war against silence, a silence that carried with it memories of Europa 4, where betrayal and machinery had conspired to turn an entire battlefield into a mausoleum of lost souls. Each time silence fell, Elias's scarred jaw throbbed with memories of decisions made in desperation and the unspeakable costs that followed. In the crisp glow of the bridge's instrumentation, Elias's gaze swept over his motley crew. His second-in-command, Naomi Carter, hunched over her console like a scholar poring over forbidden lore. Her dark curls framed a face etched by sleepless nights and overwhelming grief. Colony Tau 9, her home, her family's sanctuary, had been among the first victims of the Silent Zone's hungry void. That loss echoed in every line of her face, a silent dirge that fueled her determination. Lieutenant Dex Harper reclined in the pilot's chair, outwardly nonchalant yet betraying inner tremors, twitches at his fingertips that hinted at fear and repressed guilt. Known as a smuggler and a liar, Dex's past was a tapestry woven with threads of regret. He bore scars from the Europa 4 debacle when loyalty had been as fleeting as a half-remembered dream. His eyes darted around, haunted by restless phantoms of his former self. Ensign Mira Valdez, their dedicated engineer, maintained a facade of professionalism. Though her hands clutched the controls with white-knuckled precision, her calm tone belied the turmoil within. Raised in the enigmatic Church of the First Dawn, a cult devoted to the mystical essence of the void, Mira had spent her life in the shadow of prophecies. Now, when those very prophecies materialized before her eyes, doubts and regrets battled within her heart as she wondered if her beliefs had blinded her to the peril they faced. Looming in the background was Commander Owen Stroud, tactical officer and the self-styled professional bastard. His cold, calculating gaze flickered between Elias and the others, silently questioning every decision in a manner that was as unnerving as it was pragmatic. His skepticism served as a grim counterpoint to Elias's resolute determination. Approaching the silent zone boundary, announced Ensign Valdez in a measured tone that betrayed nothing of the chaos lurking just beyond. "All systems nominal," chimed in Commander Stroud, though his eyes spoke of uncertainty. Elias's voice, gravelly and resolute, cut through the mounting tension as he responded, "Valdez, any signs of the station?" Myra's display flickered. "Just its beacon." But, she hesitated for a heartbeat before adding, "it's broadcasting a secondary signal. Like an echo." At that instant, Naomi's head snapped up from her terminal. "Let me hear it," she insisted, her voice trembling with equal parts hope and dread. As the transmission relayed once more through the speakers, the familiar words, now dreadfully prescient, rang clear. We heard them. We answered. Now they are, without further warning, the ship lurched violently. Alarm klaxons blared as the Echo 7 shuddered out of warp. Through the viewport, the familiar pinpoints of starlight began to blink out, one by one, leaving an expanse of inky nothingness. Then the bridge was swallowed by a total blackout. Amid that oppressive darkness, a voice, its tone both familiar and alien, whispered back a cryptic response. Deep within the convoluted corridors of the Echo 7, Lieutenant Dex Harper found himself confronting a horror far beyond technical malfunctions or the usual specters of space travel. While inspecting the cargo hold, a damp, echoing chamber reeking of stale metal, he noticed that the shadows appeared to stretch in impossible ways. They elongated and warped, bending around corners as though mocking the laws of physics. At first, he attributed these sinister movements to fatigue and sleep deprivation. But then, in a moment that froze his blood, Dex caught a glimpse of his own reflection in the gleaming steel bulkhead. The face that smiled back at him was not his own, or at least it wasn't smiling in a manner that felt natural. The reflection seemed to wear an expression of malevolent glee, a specter of someone he thought he had long tried to forget. "Captain." Dex's voice rang out raw and urgent over the comms. "We've got a problem down here." Elias, ever the anchor in chaos, found Dex curled against a cold wall, a pistol raised and trembling in his hand. "Harper, report." Elias demanded, his tone a mix of command and concern. Dex's laugh, shaky and edged with despair, replied, "Either I'm losing it, or the ship is haunted." His voice cracked, laden with the weight of memories, of times when his actions had sealed men's fates, when the lines between duty and betrayal blurred into regret. Before they could explore the implications further, screams erupted from the medbay. "Elias, with Dex trailing in anxious pursuit, bolted toward the source of the terror. When they burst through the medbay door, they found it curiously empty save for a single terminal, its screen glowing with a chilling proclamation, "They see you." A panicked message from Naomi crackled over the comms, "Elias, get to the bridge. Now." With his pulse hammering in his ears, Elias rushed back, only to discover that the viewport now displayed an unimaginable void. There were no stars, no glowing signal from Omega 19, only an oppressive black that cut into the soul. Then a voice, a soft, almost mocking whisper, emerged, "You should not have answered." The journey to Omega 19 was like stepping into the belly of a dead beast. Captain Elias Rains, pulse rifle in hand, forced himself through the shattered airlock, entering corridors suffused with a pungent aroma of rust and ozone. The derelict station presented itself as a silent monument to despair, a corpse where light had long since fled, and electronic screens flickered with fragmented echoes of a once living facility. Every surface bore the same haunting inscription, etched in a substance that resembled blood, "We heard them. We answered. Now they are coming." The walls, scarred by time and neglect, seemed to pulsate as though imbued with a malign, otherworldly life. Behind him, Naomi Carter's calm inquiry broke the silence as she adjusted the blue light of her wrist scanner, her eyes reflecting both hope and exhaustion. "Life signs?" Elias asked, his voice low and edged with uncertainty. "None," Naomi replied softly. "But some sectors still pulse with power." "That's not possible." Her words trembled as though wrestling with the notion that something unnatural defied the station's demise. A sudden, echoing clang resounded along the corridor. Dex Harper spun, raising his pistol with a wild intensity. "I'm done with surprises," he snapped. "Let's nuke this place and, quiet," Mira Valdez interjected, her hand pressed firmly against the cool metal wall. "Do you hear that?" Her voice was a whisper, barely audible over the oppressive silence. From somewhere beyond, a low, resonant hum began, a sound like ancient throat singing, echoing from the very edges of reality. Then, impossibly, the wall itself trembled, its metal surface rippling as if something deep within were drawing breath. "Run," Elias ordered, his tone brooking no delay. Without waiting for their consent, he led the group into the labyrinth of Omega 19's haunted corridors. In a secluded control room, illuminated only by the intermittently flickering monitors, Naomi Carter reaccessed the terminal left behind by Dr. Eleanor Voss. The logs were fragmented and riddled with data corruption, yet one entry emerged with chilling clarity: the signal wasn't a warning. It was a trap. "We thought we were listening to the stars, but they were listening back. And when we answered, they followed the sound." Before Naomi could process this dire revelation, a cold, unnatural shadow stretched across the screen. She turned slowly and gasped, for there, standing in the doorway, was the spectral figure of her lost daughter, a small, pale child dressed in the same blue garment she had worn on that fateful day when Colony Tau 9 vanished. "Mommy," the apparition whispered, voice both sweet and sorrowful, "you found me." For an agonizing beat, Naomi's heart clung to the hope that the child was real, a precious fragment of the past returned to mend her broken spirit. But as her outstretched hand trembled, the child's smile fractured, morphing into something grotesque. the jaw unhinged like the snapping of a serpent, and the voice that emerged was not the innocent tone of youth but a deep, alien hiss, "We heard you. Now we're here." Overwhelmed by a profound sense of loss and terror, Naomi staggered back, each heartbeat echoing with the agony of her shattered past. Elsewhere within the twisting corridors of the Echo 7, Lieutenant Dex Harper found himself not only pursued by ghostly apparitions but also by the relentless specter of his own conscience. The ship's corridors stretched out like an endless labyrinth, each turn echoing memories he had long tried to bury. In one particularly desolate passage, he encountered a vision, an image of his younger self, bleeding and broken in a sordid smuggler's den. The apparition's eyes shone with accusation as a disembodied voice raged from the walls, "You left us to die." The sound was like a chorus of past sins, fueling the shame and guilt that had haunted Dex since the horrors of Europa 4. For the first time, he stopped fleeing and instead turned to face the relentless accusation. In a voice raw with remorse, he admitted, "Yeah, I did." That moment of honesty seemed to make the very shadows recoil, as if his admission shattered the malignant power they had held over him. Barely recovering his composure, Dex resumed his flight through the ever-changing corridors. As he moved through doors that melted into the walls like wax, he could sense that the ship itself was drawing on the fragments of his guilt, using his own memories as ammunition against him. "Captain." Dex's voice shattered the oppressive quiet once again over the comms. His tone was urgent, laced with a mix of fear and a newfound determination. "They're using our memories, our guilt, against us." Static swallowed his words before Elias's strained voice came through, "Where are you?" Glancing around a corridor that now stretched infinitely, Dex could see nothing but a maddening expanse of warped metal and flickering lights. "No idea," he admitted in a hushed tone. "But something's coming." As he spoke, a dark shadow pooled at his feet, a formless presence that seemed to pulse in time with his racing heartbeat. Dex raised his pistol, ever aware that every step deepened his entrapment in a nightmare of his own making. In a dimly lit corridor of Omega 19, Ensign Mira Valdez discovered something that sent a chill crawling up her spine. In the core of the station's dilapidated reactor, etched into the corroded metal, were glyphs identical to those from her childhood, a language the Church of the First Dawn revered as the Old Tongue. These symbols, relics from a faith once sustained by wonder and terror, now revealed a staggering truth. "They're not aliens," Mira whispered to herself, trembling as she ran a hand over the worn carvings. "They're older than stars. They live between seconds. And we," her voice broke as her trembling fingers traced a symbol meaning, "sacrifice." The realization struck her like a physical blow. By answering the call of the void, they had unwittingly invited something far beyond their understanding. Before she could voice her terror, Commander Owen Stroud interjected, his tone clipped and resolute as he leveled his rifle at the reactor core. "Then we blow the door shut." His practical, almost clinical approach to the unfolding horror contrasted sharply with the visceral dread Mira now felt. Almost immediately, the reactor shuddered violently. Shadows lengthened unnaturally along the walls, and from the darkness, an ancient, mocking laugh emerged, a sound that chilled the very marrow of their bones. In the ruined heart of Omega 19's command center, Captain Elias Rains stood amidst the wreckage, his ragged breathing merging with the pulsing throb of alien power that seemed to animate the very walls. Black ichor spread like living veins across the metal surfaces, as if the station were bleeding secrets from an impossible realm. Around him, the crew was splintered by terror and their personal ghosts. Naomi Carter was lost in a vortex of visions, Dex Harper was caught in an endless loop of guilt and memory, and Mira Valdez muttered desperate prayers to deities she no longer believed in. Only Commander Stroud remained steadfast by Elias's side, his rifle gripped as if it were the only lifeline in an ocean of despair. Elias, his eyes fixed on the void beyond the viewport, spoke in a low, determined tone, "We can't fight this, they're beyond our weapons and our will. But maybe we can break the cycle." His mind raced through the desperate logic of what he had learned from Dr. Voss's final logs. Stroud's hardened expression provided no comfort. "How?" he demanded. His voice, roughened by years of hardened command and battle, sought an answer that might save them all. Elias activated the damaged core logs of the station. On the flickering screen, the final entry from Dr. Eleanor Voss pulsed like a dying heartbeat. "The signal is a paradox. We heard it because we answered it. The only way out is to never respond in the first place." The implication was as frightening as it was simple. By reaching out to the unknown, they had set in motion events that they might only be able to halt by erasing themselves from the chain of cause and effect. Owen's eyes darkened at the implication. "You're talking about erasing ourselves," he said, voice heavy with bitter resignation. Elias nodded solemnly. "We have to silence the echo. It's the only chance we have at stopping this cascade of events." In the ruins of a dead colony, far from the mechanical hum of dying technology, Naomi Carter found herself alone with the ghostly apparition of her lost daughter. The spectral figure, small, pale, adorned in the blue dress that once symbolized hope, appeared and faded in a disjointed dance of light and shadow. The apparition's smile was too wide, its teeth an unnatural gleam in the dim light, and its voice a discordant blend of familiar love and unearthly malice. "Stay with me. They'll never hurt you again." For a heart battered by loss and betrayal, the offer of solace was both irresistible and horrifying. Naomi's mind warred against her aching emotions. Each memory of Tau 9, every whispered word of maternal love, clashed with the stark terror of realizing that this was no miracle but a trap set by the void itself. Her shaking hands reached toward the apparition, memories of a once happy childhood tugging at her, until a sudden voice sliced through her internal tumult via the comms. It was Captain Elias, his tone raw with urgency and grief. "Naomi, listen to me. None of this is real. Tau 9 is gone. Your family is gone. But if we act now, we can save those who remain." The command was like a lifeline thrown into a turbulent sea. Tears blurred her vision as the specter of her daughter smiled one last time, a smile that twisted into a menacing grin before dissolving into static. With a voice choked by sorrow and newfound resolve, Naomi whispered, "I'm sorry," and pulled the trigger. The sound of the shot reverberated through the void, shattering the illusion and, with it, part of her own sorrow. As chaos reigned within the corridors of the Echo 7 and Omega 19 alike, Dex Harper's journey through the ship became not just a physical escape but a pilgrimage into his own haunted past. Every step he took reverberated with echoes of guilt, a constant reminder of the men he had betrayed and the lives lost in the fires of Europa. 4. In one particularly surreal moment, as Dex ran through a corridor where the walls themselves bled memories, a vision of his younger self materialized from the very plaster. The boy's eyes were alight with a mixture of fear and accusation as the voice of countless dead comrades rose from the echoing walls. "You left us to die." For the first time, Dex allowed the weight of his misdeeds to bear down on him. He stopped, his stride faltering, and in a voice so raw it shook the very air he breathed, he admitted, "Yeah, I did." His confession seemed to fracture the oppressive force that had haunted him. The shadows around him recoiled, less insistent, as though struck by the truth of his admission. With this breakthrough, Dex realized that the entity they faced was not simply an external horror, it was the amalgamation of their worst selves and deepest regrets. Every memory, every hidden guilt, was being weaponized against them in this labyrinth of darkness. In the now crumbling command center of the Echo 7, the final moments of their desperate gambit were unfolding. Elias Rains stood before the transmitter, its ancient machinery pulsing with a strange, otherworldly energy. The recordings of his crewmates, fragments of lost souls and fleeting regrets, filled the air in a ghostly chorus. Myra's voice, trembling yet resolute, interjected through the comms, "The first dawn was wrong. The void isn't holy, it's hungry." From another speaker came Owen's terse command, "Do it, Captain. Before it's too late." Then Naomi's voice, laden with both sorrow and steely determination, concluded, "Make it so we never heard them." The magnitude of their decision lay heavy on Elias's shoulders. Before him, in the glowing heart of the transmitter, was the means to send one final pulse, a message aimed not just across space, but backwards through time itself. With trembling fingers, he set the parameters for a desperate temporal command, "Do not answer." A single burst of energy, resonant and blinding, lanced into the void. In that moment, the fabric of the universe shuddered. Past and future converged as the very act of communication was rewound, a reversal of fate meant to sever the monstrous cycle they had inadvertently set in motion. When Captain Elias Rains awoke, he found himself back aboard the Echo 7, but everything had changed. The ship radiated an eerie, unblemished light, as though time had been scrubbed clean of the horrors that had marred it. The once familiar chaos was nowhere to be found. There were no logs, no flickering ghost images of familiar faces, only an oppressive silence that was at once both disconcerting and oddly peaceful. The only tangible relic of their ordeal was a single note, scrawled in Elias's own hand in a shaky, unpracticed script, "They spared you. Don't look back." Outside the viewport, the stars shone with a quiet dignity. They burned without whisper or shadow. The oppressive chorus of voices, the monstrous echoes of old regrets, had been silenced. And yet, in the midst of that unnerving peace, Elias could not shake the lingering doubt, had their desperate gambit truly rewritten destiny, or had they merely postponed the inevitable return of the void's hunger? Months later, as the rebuilt Echo 7 cruised through still, untroubled space, its corridors now bathed in a soft, natural light, Captain Elias Rains sat alone in his quarters reflecting on the events that had so irrevocably altered his life. Though the void was silent and the memory of terror had faded into something like myth, he could still feel the weight of every choice he had made. In a quiet moment of introspection, Elias recalled the faces of his crewmates, the eyes of Naomi Carter filled with sorrow and fierce courage, the haunted look in Dex Harper's eyes as he finally made peace with the past, and Mira Valdez, whose deeply rooted faith had been shattered and then reforged in the fires of truth. Each of their journeys had been a study in the multifaceted nature of human frailty and strength. They had all paid a terrible price. Their sins, regrets, and sacrificial acts were now woven into the fabric of the universe as a cautionary tale. Elias's own soul bore the scars of memory and loss. Though he had been spared by the echo of time and the decisive pulse of energy he had unleashed, he knew that every decision left an indelible mark. There was an unspoken promise in his heart that he would honor the sacrifice of his crewmates by guarding the silence and ensuring that no future generation would fall prey to the same abyss. In the months that followed, as the Echo 7 systems were restored and the scars of cosmic warfare began to heal, murmurs of strange occurrences emerged in the scientific community. Some reported anomalous signals in the deep recesses of space, whispers of voices that could be heard only in the dead of night, hinting that the actions taken on Omega 19 might have only reset a cycle rather than ended it. Naomi Carter, now a quiet yet determined researcher, spent long hours poring over every fragment of forgotten data, trying to decipher whether the void had truly been vanquished or if its hunger was merely dormant, biding its time. In quiet conversations with fellow scientists, she would speak in hushed tones about the paradoxical nature of the signal and the chilling realization that sometimes, to break free from a cycle, one must accept that the cycle might always lurk in the shadows of memory. Dex Harper, whose personal journey had taken him from a desperate smuggler to a man humbled by remorse, found solace in the simple act of rebuilding relationships. He visited memorials for the lost, forged unexpected bonds with survivors, and slowly, over time, attempted to atone for the sins of his past. His encounters with remnants of his former self often turned into meditative moments of self-forgiveness, a stark contrast to the relentless chase of guilt that had once tormented him. Mira Valdez's faith, irrevocably altered by the events at Omega 19, evolved into a pragmatic spiritualism, a belief that while ancient forces might dwell at the edges of reality, the true power lay within human resolve to choose love and sacrifice over fear and hatred. In quiet prayer-like meditations and in the warmth of newly kindled relationships, she discovered that hope could thrive even in places touched by darkness. One night, as Elias gazed out from the bridge of the Echo 7, now a silent sentinel gliding through an untroubled galaxy, a gentle murmur began to rise from the deep recesses of the cosmos. It was almost imperceptible, like a lullaby carried on a distant wind. For a brief moment, the captain's heart skipped a beat as he wondered whether it was simply the echo of his own memories, or if the void, though subdued, had yet another message to deliver. In that fleeting moment, he remembered the words of his final transmission, the desperate command that had rewritten fate, "Do not answer." A shiver ran down his spine as he considered the possibility that the universe was filled with unanswered questions. There were mysteries beyond human understanding, secrets inscribed in the night sky that would forever challenge the limits of knowledge and mercy. And in that realization lay a bittersweet blend of terror and hope. While the silence had been reclaimed, it was the silence after the storm, a quiet that demanded vigilance, for the stars might whisper again. As the Echo 7 continued its voyage through the vast reaches of space, each member of the crew, those who survived, those remembered in quiet prayers, and even the echoes of those who had been lost, found in themselves a renewed commitment to face the unknown. The journey had not ended with the transmission, it had simply transformed into something more profound. Elias recorded his thoughts in a log, one final message intended for future travelers who might one day encounter the silent void: we are not defined solely by our failures or our losses. In each burst of cosmic silence lies the possibility of rebirth. If you ever hear the stars whisper, remember that every life, every choice, carries a resonance that shapes the universe. Do not answer if it calls for your undoing, but also do not fear the silence that follows. For in that silence, hope, courage, and redemption may yet be found. In these words, he entrusted the legacy of Omega 19 and the Echo 7 to future generations, a reminder that while the cycle of fate might seem inescapable, humanity's resolve to overcome darkness was its brightest beacon. Years later, far beyond the scope of the immediate catastrophe, the name Omega 19 became both a myth and a cautionary tale. Academics, religious sects, and spacefarers alike whispered of the fateful encounter, each retelling layering additional myth with truth. Some recounted how the station's final message had been a paradox that erased their own existence, while others insisted it was a call to awaken something deep within the human heart. Naomi Carter would eventually pen a memoir detailing the trials, losses, and unyielding hope that had defined those desperate months. In its pages, she described the surreal beauty of a cosmic battlefield, the haunting glimmers of lost souls in the void, and, most poignantly, the discovery that sometimes salvation lay not in silencing the past, but in embracing it with all its imperfections. Dex Harper, transformed by his journey from guilt to forgiveness, dedicated himself to helping others overcome their own inner demons, be it through quiet acts of redemption or through direct confrontation with the shadows that lurked in the corners of human existence. Mira Valdez, whose spiritual journey had taken her from blind faith to informed skepticism and finally to an enlightened understanding of the universe's paradoxical nature, became a revered voice in the scientific and philosophical communities. She taught that while ancient forces might dwell in the spaces between the seconds, it was the human spirit that could bring meaning even to the vast, indifferent cosmos. And Captain Elias Rains, the reluctant hero burdened with the scars of choices made in desperate times, continued his endless vigil among the stars. He knew that while the echo might have been silenced, for now, the universe would always be filled with unanswered questions and the ceaseless, unpredictable whisper of the void.